Good morning, everybody. I think everybody's joined who's going to join by now. I've just had a couple more participants there. So welcome to the construction sector webinar that we're going to run today. It's going to run for about 45 minutes. My name's Mark Shepherd. I'm from the Cheshire and Warrington Local Enterprise Partnership, the Growth Hub, and I'm going to be hosting this webinar today. Roughly the format is going to be that there's going to be a few introductions, a little bit about the Growth Hub, and then we're going to get into the discussions as quickly as possible. So first, a little bit of housekeeping. So we can't hear or see you, so don't worry about any background noise. We still want you to interact by using the Q and A button though, so they're both at the bottom of your screen rather than the chat function. And we just need to let you know that this session is being recorded, so it's going to be put up on the website. So yeah, over to introduce our speakers today. We have obviously you've got myself. I'll just give you a little bit of an intro on that in a minute. Wendy Osborn is from CITB. She's the partnerships manager there. I'll let Wendy introduce herself in a minute. Richard Buck from Galliford. I'm sure you all know who they are, and he's the business development director there. And Alan Robson, who is project for safety, he's the managing director there. So really quite a really good spread of speakers today. So just very quickly, I wanted to give you some information about the Growth Hub. So we've been very, very busy, as a lot of these organisations have been over the last 2 to 3 months, especially the last 2 months. We've been making sure that businesses have been fully informed on packages that are available, the support packages that the government has been providing, and that's been on a local and a national basis. We've been engaging with businesses across the region to support with a wide range of things, for example, accessing grants, understanding the furlough process, loans, and all sorts of other inquiries that have come in. It's been a really, really challenging time. We've been updating the website on a regular, well, pretty much a daily basis, and we found that that's been really, really appreciated, with just a steady stream of really accurate information, direct through from government and policy as soon as that's updated. Recently, we've actually switched our focus now, and we're looking at getting back to work, which is what the subject of these webinars is all about. So the recovery period, as we're calling it. And then just finally, the LEP is now working on making sure that the whole sub-region is joined up. So, you know, different local authorities, the bids, the business organisations, all sharing information so that we can see, you know, and create a picture of what we need to do next. So yeah, that's us. And just quickly, myself, I'm a skills broker for the Accelerate project at the Growth Hub, and that's all about training. So I'll just give you a really brief bit of information about that at the end of the session, and that's something that could be really you know, useful at the moment to businesses. So that is the introductions done. It's now over to the panelists just for a brief introduction. So if we could start with Wendy. Wendy, would you mind just saying a little bit about yourself and your organisation?
Morning. So I'm Wendy Osborn. I'm Partnership Manager for the Northwest of England for CITB. Basically, the role of CITB is to ensure that the construction industry's got the access to the skills it needs. And a major reason for that, and we're seeing this at the moment, is that there's ebb and flow across the whole economy, but particularly experienced in the construction sector. And that can have a major impact on businesses' ability to deliver construction projects and ensure they've got the skill sets they need. So that's broadly what we're here for. Probably key areas we're working on at the moment: apprenticeships, and trying to ensure that we retain a flow of apprentices into the sector. Thinking about candidates who may be currently working in the sector but might leave at the moment. So what are the options and what are the things we can do there to try and encourage people to stay in or come back as opportunities arise. A big thing we've been asked for support with is cash flow by construction companies at the moment. So there's been things like putting apprenticeship grants in an advance payment status, so you can get those grants before you would normally, to kind of help you retain those apprentices. Also, we've suspended the levy for a period to support cash flow. Beyond that, it's really about the long-term recovery. So we've been doing a lot of work with organisations like the Construction Leadership Council, the federations, to look at what that roadmap needs to look like and where we need to place the support and the funding for the future. So that's what we're doing at the moment.
Not much then. Okay, sounds like you've been a bit busy like us. Yeah, really interested in the apprenticeships actually, which I think I'd like to come back to with a question on that. I think a lot of people have been inquiring about that. Okay, Richard, are you able to come online and give us a quick introduction?
Yeah, good morning everybody. My name is Richard Buck. I'm Business Development Director for Galliford Northwest. We are part of a wider group. We operate out of Fernhead in Warrington, and we employ around 200 people in the region and deliver projects in education, health, aviation, rail, MOD. So probably 80–90% of our business is in public sector and in regulated sort of sectors. And the interesting thing over the last 3 months is, for us, by nature, our industry is collaborative. We spend a lot of time working in teams, whether it's design teams, procurement, right across the sort of spectrum. And that is generally done face-to-face in meeting rooms. For those of us who've been in the industry a long time, it's very difficult from a cultural and a behavioural point of view. It's a big challenge to change from that. So it's the industry for us is sort of turned on its head a bit in the last 12 weeks, but we're getting through it. And well, I'll talk about it a little bit later. But the headlines really for us is there's 3 key things. One for us is these GT people, Galliford Try people. Of which we've obviously cleared 2 key issues. One is the office, and one is the other is the site. So how do we run an office where which normally has 50 people in it, and now it's down to 3, with the capability of bringing back up to probably 12 at any one time. And how do we run 10 sites across the region with 200 people of our own? Probably 800 supply chain members, and that's the third element of it, is the supply chain design teams. How do we coordinate what we actually do on site, bringing materials in, bringing people in, and safe working conditions on site in areas where sometimes particularly when a building's closed up, it's a challenge. So those are the sort of things we've been wrestling with over the last 2 to 3 months.
Yeah, okay, and I think there'll be a lot of nodding heads around the place with similar issues. But it's great to get the perspective of a larger business like yourselves and what you're doing about it. So yeah, I'm sure we'll come back to that. Thank you very much. And Alan, are you able to introduce yourself briefly and give us an idea about your role and the business?
I am now. You know, I've done these for weeks and weeks, and we still have technical faults.
I'm relieved to see your face. I've got to say, yeah. I wasn't sure you were going to appear there. So
it's all compounded by also having contractors upstairs in the office who are also making a hell of a lot of noise. So I've relocated to the ground floor. So we're here anyway. So apologies, guys. Right. I hope everyone can hear me okay. Yeah, Alan Robson, Managing Director of Project for Safety, and we are CDM advisors, and we offer PD support, principal designer support to architects and contractors. We also are retained by Galliford Try, so we know Richard guys, and we work with them quite well. So yeah, we've been despite the changes. So I suppose today I'll share what we're experiencing as from our own point of view, from a business, but also what we're doing for our clients out in the construction field and even pre-construction, actually, with reoccupation of sites. We've learned a lot the last few weeks. So despite a drop in our turnover, we've managed to carry on and get through it. We do a lot of retained work, so a lot of our support is strategic, and we work with architects, builders, subcontractors, and clients and end users. So after the first sort of 2 to 3 weeks of a bit of a what the hell's going on here, and sort of refocusing. So we've been helping clients and contractors, particularly from day one of the lockdown. So we can share them experiences, challenges, mistakes that we've made. I'm happy to share them and what we've learned, and I suppose a bit about what we're doing more so now and moving forward for our other clients, and hopefully share that with the guys on the call. And happy to share any resources afterwards if it's of any use to anyone. I'm sure it will be. Yeah, that sounds great. And your experience, from what you've described and the way your business is set up, the way you work, I'm sure there'll be some cross-cutting themes there, but there'll be some differences as well. So great. I mean, first, I think if we can go to some general questions, and this is open to everybody. I think the idea really is that we can have more of a group discussion, and then we'll come to and some more specific questions targeted at certain people further on. So the first question I've got through here is, and this is I don't know who wants to pick this up. We've got who tends to be responsible for site security and safety during the coronavirus crisis. And then we've got another one. Should employers introduce temperature checks as further precautionary measure to protect its workforce against COVID-19? I can kick off if you like. Alan, would you like? Yeah, great. Yeah, I think so. I suppose starting at a high level point of view, and we apply CDM to all kinds of projects. So I think it starts with the client is ultimately responsible. Even when he employs a contractor to deliver that, the client, the buck stops with the client. So it's quite interesting, actually. We've seen from different sides of clients maybe burying their head in the sands and trying to put the onus on contractors. And it is, if they employ a contractor to protect the site, secure the site, they're there. But ultimately, and I don't want to get into the legal contract side, and I'm certainly no solicitor, but the whole key message of CDM is that the buck stops with the client. The client is ultimately responsible and accountable. So does that answer the first element, I suppose? Yeah. Has anybody, any of the other speakers got a comment on there, or do you agree with that?
I think, yeah, I broadly agree with it. The temperature thing, I think we've not introduced temperature checks. We're starting to, and we'll use as we return to work more widely, a self-declaration process. So that's on a sort of 2 levels. So you've got a suitability to attend work in terms of reviewing, are you one of 4 groups? And that can be, do you live with someone who's vulnerable? Has anybody been ill? So that's a general declaration. And there's also through an app-based program, a daily self declaration. So, and that's applicable to all of our employees now. That on a daily basis, you're required to tap on the app and say, yeah, I'm good to work. Okay. And that's just a monitoring process. So yeah, it's an important thing we do.
And is there any guidance, Wendy, for that at the moment? Any official guidance that you can give your organisation?
Yeah, so from CITB's perspective, the role we're playing in that is really providing training and resources that sit alongside the SOP. So it's not something where we'd necessarily say one way or the other if it's not within the SOP. Effectively, we'd say, here's some resources, here's some support, and there's a lot of online resource and guidance about that guidance. But in some scenarios, some contractors are going above and beyond, are doing slightly different things for their situation. So I guess it's using that potentially as a guide, and then looking at what your situation is and what the situation is with your client as well.
Okay, thanks.
I think just to pick up on that as well, as I think that the CITB and the Leadership Council's guidelines to date have been good. They've been a great starting point, but I think we need to move on. We need to get some more practical guidance out there. And I know we've got the sector-specific guidelines, but I think we need to develop that. And I think we need maybe some more online visual resources that can be made available.
Yeah, I think that's fair, and I think there's an intention to move in that direction. So I guess there's two major things we're doing. One is, as the SOP's updated, making sure we've updated what we've got. There is also a website, I think it's called Construction COVID Response. If you pop that into Google, it's a really terrible title for a website, but it is a really good website. So what a lot of companies have done there, and their case studies of how they've addressed it on site are available.
Excellent. Thank you.
At a corporate level, we have a nice little process called the Health Hazard Mitigation process. It's a good read at 27 pages, but it does condense everything we're doing. And this, to us, it's an education process. It's a behavioural process, and we've got to bring our people who work for GT. But you know, the plethora of supply chain organisations and the wire from big organisations, M&E companies who are as large as us, right down to the guys who have 2 people in a van. We have guys at Manchester Airport on the runway schemes who are coming from out of area historically by crew bus, 8 to a crew bus, and now that's a different process. They have to have more distance. They have to travel separately. That to people who maybe have small family supply chain organisations, plasterers, carpentry, all sorts of organisations who generally travel 2 to 3 to a van, it becomes very difficult because it adds more cost, adds more logistics, but that's a case of adapting to those new scenarios.
I think also we've just got to be careful that we have, I mean, what we've been promoting is the CITB guidance, you know, the government guidelines as well, and just trying to have one sort of focus on, there's so much guidelines and takes on the approach. I think we just need to maybe focus, because I think otherwise we can maybe get lost in the huge amounts of differing guidelines out there. So we're certainly focusing on CITB and the Leadership Council. And even actually, we particularly in the early first couple of weeks was the Irish, the government's the CIF guidelines, which I thought were very good and maybe a little bit more practical.
Okay, that's great feedback for CITB anyway, and it sounds like they're doing a great job. And as you say, it's the interpretation, isn't it? That's the difficult bit. So moving on to the now. Not having spent a huge amount of time in the construction sector, I'm sort of more engineering and tech background. I'm not sure. So this temperature, should employers introduce temperature checks as a further precautionary measure to protect its workforce against COVID-19? Who wants to take that one?
I'll have a to introduce temperature checks is, from a logistical point of view, is a big challenge, because one, who's gonna take them? The recording of that data, it's a major it would be a major challenge, and logistically, I think it'd be too much. We've gone the self-declaration route, and one of the questions in the self-declaration is, do you have a high temperature? Do you have a persistent cough? Going through the regulated questions that we've all been asking ourselves. So our position is not to temperature check on any of the sites.
And it's not a recommendation we're making to our clients. We're not saying don't do it, but it's not at the forefront of our recommendations. I think
one of the elements is just to do it. You've got to be PPE'd up and have the right equipment. It's got to be sanitized. You know, there's a risk in terms of in our organisation, like organisations, taking temperatures, because you've got to get up close and personal. You've got to have the right kit. You've got to have they've got to be sanitised before and after. Quite a difficult undertaking to commit to on site.
I mean, that's actually links into a further question. So what actually, you know, what enhanced cleaning procedures are being undertaken, you know, on site? You know, could you just tell us what you're both doing there?
Yeah, I mean, we have like a hierarchy of controls on site, and the key one, I mean, it's basic stuff. It's if you're coming to site, wash your hands before you go in. We use biometrics. We're a key thing on monitoring site entry and people leaving. That's gone. Basic control, eating, toilet, cleaning toilets, access in and out of toilets, access in and out of canteens. All those sort of basic things are where we focus the effort and put in new processes and additional cleaning. It really is basic stuff. And I suppose because when you've got our organisation works in the MOD, it works in health, we borrow best practice from areas like health. If you've got worked in a hospital delivering acute wards or refurbs, you understand about the cleaning regimes, and some of those have been willingly borrowed onto sites. It's you up the cleaning processes. The moped you might have used for 5 days only gets used for once, and it's used once and throw away. Your disinfectants and the materials you use, the whole thing just gets ramped up and is improved.
And I think you know, Richard spoke about the detail there, but you're certainly part of our role, and I think safety professionals and actually the wider industry, you know, all stakeholders is how we communicate the provisions we've put in place, and that's for me is the biggest thing to come out of this is and our role as a business and as individuals is how we communicate the change and keep that message fresh. Because it's all about mindset, and something I keep repeating on every call that I've done and the webinars where we've shared information is I think the buy-in from the industry right across the industry from stakeholders has been phenomenal, and from a safety professional's point of view is it's what dreams have been made of, is actually getting guys to sort of sit up and listen and engage with us. So I think part of our role in that is, Richard's guys have to do the delivery and get into the detail, and as we do, but it's how we communicate that and keep that message fresh.
Okay, great. Yeah, I've got a question for Wendy actually now. So if I'm a construction employer and my employees are reluctant to come in, how can I persuade them to come into work if they've got worries and concerns?
I think the major thing to do is having a look at the training you're giving them about getting back on site and what that looks like. So ensuring they're comfortable with what the SOP is, what the SOP does, and they're clear about social distancing on site. I think an awful lot, anecdotally, of what we're being told on site is that site managers are enforcing it very strictly, and we're being told an awful lot about people being thrown off who aren't following it. So there's a very kind of strong message from, I think, really all of industry about the importance of following those procedures. There's support and training you can do beforehand, and there's things you might want to do to settle them in advance. So it could be thinking about things like phone calls to those people, ensuring they feel okay, getting a sense of actually what their experience of lockdown's been, I know we quite often, particularly with apprentices, you're coming across scenarios where perhaps there's someone in the family who's needing to shield, and other things that you might not be aware of that might be increasing their anxiety. So there's a real need, I think, with those people to understand what their particular situation is and why there might be increased anxiety there. So it could be something specific about the site or the job, or it could be something else about the rest of their lives. So one thing we'd suggest on that, I think, is the checklists, the SOP checklists, and using those. So they'll take you through a series of questions for talking with those people about, are they isolating, has there been anything like that, and it'll give you additional information that might give you some information about why they are uncomfortable, or what the concerns might be.
Yeah, the human element of as Alan or Richard, have you had sort of experience of that so far?
Yeah, it's something that's cropped up the last couple of weeks, and it is, you know, it's laying down what the strategy is for the return to work, and I think that's where our roles will change and evolve now, because it's not just about the workplace, it's about what's going on at home, how are they getting to work, public transport. It's, you know, we've got my co-director Max Meadows was in London yesterday visiting sites, and that's, you know, public transport down there is, you know, a bigger issue than it is up north. So it's not just the returning to work and that day to day as we previously knew it. It's, you know, as Wendy said, is the people at home that are shielding, maybe a bit more vulnerable, and how do we get to work? So it's our roles. We don't just have to consider the usual day to day, and I think it is going to be an issue. I know particularly for some of our construction contractor clients, is getting some guys back has been difficult. So it's about laying down a strategy that gives them the confidence, and actually it's going to take time, this. So, you know, maybe they return a couple hours a day or part-time, or we do a trial run. We've been doing a lot of trial runs with clients, whether it be for office, warehouse or construction sites. Is this will take time. You know, we won't be returning to normal. You know, I think we will in time. You know, I don't think we've changed forever, but it will take time. And I think it's looking at individuals as opposed to trying to offer a blanket approach for people.
I think that the sites are probably, because they haven't stopped, are probably in a better place than the office. The office effectively has been shut for 6 weeks, bar a couple of people. We're now readying that for return to work. So I think probably max 12 to 15 people will be in work in the office at any one time with the right distancing, and that's, you know, that's going to be the interesting thing from a behaviour. And I think perhaps one of the issues that's maybe been not overlooked, but we've got 20% of our staff on furlough at the moment, with a further people isolating because of health issues, only communicating by Teams or Zoom. Actually, their mental health side of it needs a bit of thinking about, because if you've been off for 2 to 3 months, and we know in corporate world, if you've been off the pace, getting back on the pace is quite a challenge. And when we start getting back into work full time, I think it's going to take quite some weeks to get people back up to speed. And Alan's point about return to work, right, first week it's 2 days a week, 3, and building up, I think is something to consider. And just the intellectual side of it, getting back into the room is going to be a bit of a challenge after you've been away. But that's something we're going to have to get into. The beat of construction and property, in construction, certainly in bidding and winning work, a bid comes in, you've got a 4 to 6 week period of actually bidding and winning it to win it. It's an intense period, and if you haven't done it for a while, or you've been on a slightly slower beat, that's going to be a problem and a challenge for people to get back up to pace. In our case, within the office has been rearranged, so there is, from a quite small cellular sort of open plan. We're now we've redesigned the office and spread people about a bit. But it'll be interesting. The next, as I think we go back in July, August time, it's going to be an interesting 6 months.
And just on that,
we're seeing is, go on.
Sorry,
what we're seeing as well, Mark, is complaints, for the sites that have been going for, 10, 12, 13 weeks, whatever we're on now, is complacency creeping back in. So although we're seeing a really positive uptake, is actually we need to keep the message fresh. So going back to the communication and the mindset is we're visiting sites now and I think, complacency is creeping in. So it's making sure that we keep on top of that as well.
I think that's one of the biggest challenges. It's human nature, isn't it? And I think that's going to be across a lot of sectors. Where he'll start off with the best intentions, but then deadlines, targets need hitting, that sort of stuff, and things will be forgotten. So yeah, it's keeping that standard up. Just something that you were saying there, Richard, is talking about offices being reorganised. How I've got a question come through. How can this practically be done on site? I mean, I as an outsider to the construction sector, I can see straight away that that's a bit of a challenge in a lot of situations. So how are you doing that?
The site setup, as in the offices and the cabins, we've tried to basic things where you've got where guys and girls were opposite each other in terms of desking. We've moved the desks around. Where you've had 4 people in a cabin, it's now 2 people. So there's basic things you do from a practical point of view. The canteen, staggered meal times, staggered start times, 1 in, 1 out from a toileting point of view. There's a number of practical sort of things that you've just got to get a grip of and bring in. Added cleaning on door handles, those sort of things. One interesting example that's come up, a bit of best practice, it's about gloves, PPE and gloves. We're used to wearing gloves on site. What do you do when you take them off, and where you put them is a real detail, an element of detail we've got to adapt to. So just when you come in for lunch, wash your hands and stick your gloves on the table. Absolute no. They've got to be put in an isolated place in a locker or whatever. So there's no spread of contamination. So that's one thing that's been exercising our SHE teams in how you dealing with the sort of potential risk of infection on gloves and other PPE. And the whole PPE process of masks, no mask, gloves, no glove. It's an interesting one, but you develop your processes week by week, and I don't think we'll ever get to a point where we say we're good to go now. We've finished that. There'll be best practice and knowledge share as we move forward through this.
Do you have anything to add to that, Alan?
I think the biggest one, or the biggest introduction, and there's cost associated with this, but a lot of our sites have increased the working day to split the shifts, spread the numbers across. So, we've seen that done early on. So, particularly the contractor clients now are working at a reduced capacity. But also the biggest one, and maybe there's some taboo associated to this, but actually when we're doing our plans and we're looking at site plans and highlighting where we think the pinch points are, is actually, holding our hands up and saying we can't social distance in this area. We can't do 2 meters. So how do we get around it? How do we look at it? How do we pick it apart, really? So, yeah. And then another thing, just, again, back on the communication is one of our clients in Liverpool is Crossfield Construction. We've been working with them on a retained basis for about 3 years. And for years, we've struggled to get their site managers in the same room because they're running sites, so we had to go around them all individually. So with Crossfield now and a couple of other clients, including Galliford, we do 2 weekly calls one on a Monday to kick off the week, you know, just to brief the guys, keep the message fresh, and also get feedback from them of challenges and issues they've had the week before and the week ahead. So just getting people talking is the big one, and getting their subcontractors to feed in as well, taking advice from them.
Okay. Unless we've got anything, Wendy, I think we're going to move on to some individual questions. Have you got any comments around site safety there?
I think the only other thing to say is, I suppose following on from what Alan's just said, in some of these scenarios, what companies are doing is just looking at ways of completely mitigating the risk in some of those areas where you can't do the social distancing. So as an example, I was talking to a company the other day that isn't actually having catering on site. So there's expectations around things like packed lunches, which has maybe created some other costs, but they're not necessarily the exorbitant costs you might have from trying to double the size of a canteen facility or something like that. So with some of these things, there are other practical ways that aren't necessarily about increasing space or capacity. There's different ways of addressing that.
Just on that, I know you want to move on, Mark, but we've got one of our clients who's on Liverpool Waters, and they've done a deal with a local coffee shop to provide tea and coffee to try and eliminate and reduce the cross-contamination on site. And I think that's brilliant, because it's also helping out the hospitality sector, who are probably going to be in a worse state than will be in a worse state than the construction sector after this. So I think, you know, thinking outside the box of things like that, I just think are brilliant, and helping you know, their neighbours as well, if you like. So that was just to end that point.
No, that's great. That's I can see how that works. Thanks. No, I think that there's a lot of stuff in there. I think that everybody will have their own story, but there's some useful discussion points there. And again, this is going to be shared with a good number of our clients and on the website, so it'll be useful. Just some individual questions. So Wendy, back to you. Actually, you mentioned apprenticeships earlier on. So what advice would you give to companies who have apprentices or had apprentices, or maybe considering taking on new apprentices this year?
Okay, so for people who've already got them, we are hearing concerns around getting them finished. We know that probably about 50% of construction apprentices are furloughed at the moment. They are starting to come back to site. We're seeing that. So that's kind of a good positive step. Whilst a lot of them have been furloughed, it has been possible to continue the training in a lot of instances, which has been really good. The big thing I'd say is actually the government guidance has been really, really flexible around things like breaks in learning. So if they need to take a break because they physically can't do anything on their apprenticeship, that option is there. The government's also moved quite fast on the endpoint assessment for anybody who's got a standard and has to do a set test. In a lot of instances, they've been able to change those so they can be done remotely. Or there's been kind of, within the funding, they're allowing for that extension. For any organisation that's worried about losing an apprentice and doesn't know if they can keep them on, there's a couple of things I'd say. So we've got a dedicated email address for companies in that situation, and this will go out afterwards. I think I've given some additional resources to the team on this. So it's apprenticeships.covid19 at citb.co.uk. But if you've got a scenario with an individual apprentice you're worried about, we can give you some support and guidance on that. The other thing is that we've basically front-loaded our apprenticeship grants, so we're paying our attendance grants a year in advance. So if you've got immediate cash flow issues that mean you have to consider letting that apprentice go, there is some support towards that. So that's $2,500 a year, and that's available for advanced and intermediate apprentices. But there's also support for higher apprentices. So if you've got them at that degree level or that level 4, there's guidance there as well and support. In terms of new apprentices, really mixed bag in terms of the conversations we're having with companies at the moment. Some companies are telling us that they've just not quite got the headspace to be thinking about this yet, whereas others are actually seeing what's happening as an opportunity and are recognising some of the challenges and problems in their business that are actually caused by not investing in skills. So some of them really are saying, right, we want to get on top of this and get hold of it. What a lot of training providers are doing is that they are planning on taking autumn cohorts, but what a lot can't necessarily tell you at the moment is exactly what that looks like in terms of things like how they'll deliver the training, the social distancing. They're working through those things at the moment, and starting the conversation early is a good thing if you can with those providers, because lots of them are taking employer feedback on that. So some employers are saying to training providers, we do not want our apprentices in a college environment because it's something that we can't control. It's them in a different setting, so we'd rather you did the training remotely. So there's a lot of kind of potential negotiation and support for that. We're also working with training providers to make sure they're looking at things like January cohorts and starting cohorts later in the year. So there is, you know, we don't necessarily lose a whole year on this. The other thing we're trying to do is there's potentially quite a lot of full-time students in college or private training providers who you can convert to apprentices. So looking at different ways of trying to get them in the system at a later date. So there's a lot of work going on it. The other thing you can do as well is specific concerns or specific problems you've got. You'll have a local advisor from CITB and they can talk you through whatever your specific issue is and try and help you solve that, because it's very different in every case.
Okay, thank you for that. And I think another issue that I've certainly been made aware of is that a lot of training providers are in a similar position with furloughed staff and reduced numbers, so the communication is really difficult as well in a lot of situations.
Yeah, we reckon from the last month, the training providers we've spoken to nationally, we think about 20% have shut down completely, but a lot of those training providers are doing short course provision, doing stuff that's quite specialist. So they might be doing, say, short course plant training, which really there's no way of getting around a lot of this. So they've taken the decision to furlough, shut down temporarily, and then come back. Most FE colleges and certainly universities and most private training providers that are doing apprentices are there in some format. But the challenges, I guess, that a lot of them are dealing with, it's finishing off the apprentices they've currently got, that being number one priority, and making sure they're okay. And then starting to think about how they deal with really all the social distancing issues we've just talked about on site, the exact same kind of conversations going on. Do we go over an extended timetable? Do we do more remote learning? Do we go to site more? All these kind of questions that they're starting to work through.
Moving back to I think we'll go to Alan for this one. If a member of staff has tested and positive for COVID-19, how do you let everybody know that they've been in contact? I mean, have you had that sort of situation yet?
We haven't had that situation yet, and I think again, and I keep banging on about it's about the communication, and I think it's about transparency, really. And I think in making sure that, you know, any specific site policies that we produce, that they're communicated so everyone's aware of what the protocol is. You know, we've got guys out on site today, you know, backing up and doing audits and checking what's going on. So I think again, for us, it's how we react, and making sure that everyone, you know, right down, you know, subcontractors right across the site are aware of what the protocol is, and that will vary, you know, from client to client. Yeah, and it's I mean, we're still waiting to see what this track and trace app is going to do for us, for the government. But for us, is back to you know, communicating the message of what the protocol is, and making sure that we can get sites closed and people isolated, and making sure that everyone's safe is the sort of high level response, without getting into detail.
Yeah, okay. I think that's all we've got time for this webinar, unless Richard, have you got any closing remarks there? I
think I'm just echoing what I said before, really. In this will develop. This is going to be around for longer than we probably think right now. So it's the actual best practice and what we do on a daily, weekly basis is going to develop. because this is going to be here for another 12 months or longer. So we're in it for the long haul. We've got, and it's an interesting thing for us, is you've got sites that we're halfway through or 2/3 of the way through a job, which are coming to an end. But today we've got sites that are opening up, whether it's in Liverpool or Manchester or whatever. And the logistics and site setups that will be in terms of the methodology and the risk assessments will be slightly different than you would have done 6 months ago. So all the things that we've learned in the last 3 months need to be applied to that as we go forward.
Okay. Thank you very much, everybody. There's been quite a range of topics there, and I think really from my point of view, a lot of that is people relating to that and that sparking off ideas or potentially some solution and proactive approach to working in this environment. And as you say, a lot about communication, a lot about keeping moving with the change, and then something that you actually mentioned, Alan, that really hit home is that keeping those standards up as time goes on. So it's all great at first, and we've got these new procedures to follow, but then it'll drop off. It naturally will. So it's how do you keep that going? So thank you very much. Thanks to everybody, all the guest speakers. It's been great. This is going to be, as I said, it's going to be on our website now. All participants of the webinar will receive contact details and information. And obviously, do contact CITB, do contact us if you have any questions, any queries. We can signpost, we can try and advise, and I'm sure Wendy will be able to help you with some really good guidance. So, thank you very much. I look forward to
thank you.
Hopefully speaking to you again soon, and thanks for everybody who's taken part today.
Cheers, guys. Enjoy the weekend. Bye. Take care.
Bye.
Thanks.